So now is a time where we enter into meditation together. So I invite you now to just gently close your eyes and just gently allow your feet to begin to root to Mother Earth. Just allowing your body to draw her healing energy up through every cell of your body. Just beginning to relax into your seat, just allowing it to hold you and to meld with you. So today I invite you now to just allow yourself to flow in this moment and in this power of now. This power of this moment, right here, right now. Allowing yourself to feel this wonderful moment right here, right now. Just allowing your breath to flow naturally. Thoughts may come and go, but that's okay. We acknowledge them and we just release them and just allow them to be. Noticing any sensations in the body, maybe a rumble of the stomach or an itch of the arm. We simply just acknowledge them and show gratitude. Show gratitude for them allowing us to know that we are alive. And then we just gently release them, bringing us back to this moment of now. Feeling the beat of your heart, the expansion of your lungs as air enters and leaves the body. Just again being grateful for this present moment, right here and right now. As we prepare to enter into our moment of silence, I invite you to just allow yourself to be, just truly experience the here and the now. Leaving any thoughts of worry or fear outside and just be here now in this present moment as we enter into our moment of silence. And as you begin to bring your awareness back to this room, you also bring the awareness of now. And of knowing that the place of the Most High is found within. That place and that moment of now where we meet the God within and we strengthen our connection to the God within. Knowing that there truly is no other moment but right here and right now. And we just gently breathe and we allow this moment to be. And so it is. Namaste. And let's just continue to affirm this wonderful moment of now. Thank you, radiant beings. I was talking to the first service when they were here and telling them, I don't think there's any instrument that Pete cannot play. So you can hand him something he's probably never seen before, and he'd be like, oh, and just pick it up and start playing it. That's our talented Pete Calgaro. Right. So today kicks off our 4th week already on the Gift of Anger series. And I don't know about you all, but I've really been enjoying it because, I really wasn't even planning on giving a series when I found this book. And I had told some of you I just went home Sunday after church one day and I was kind of going through some of my books and I refound it. And, it's just been a treasure. I read it not long after it first came out, but just reading it again has been like reading it all over again for the first time. And I think it's because this time it hits a little more close to home, with some of the things that are going on. But I'm happy to have rediscovered it and to be able to share that with you all, and rediscover it together. So, thank you for being willing to go through this. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this in just a moment, but I wanted to just open this by saying that Arun Gandhi, he's the grandson of Gandhi, he's the one that wrote this book. He's got to be one of the bravest men that I know, and I'll tell you why. I think that in just a few minutes. But first of all, I just kind of wanted to just kind of review a little bit of what we've learned so far in this because it's good stuff. So one of the first things we've talked about is how to use our anger for good. About how it's okay to feel anger. I mean, if we're living and breathing, we're likely to experience anger from time to time, right? I mean, there's going to be some of those things out there that just tweak you and just tweak you the wrong way, no matter how spiritual we are, no matter how evolved or awoken we are, there's just going to be things that just sometimes rub you a little wrong. It just becomes important that we take that anger that we feel, though, and we focus it in the right direction. We want to focus it for good, deal with our anger in constructive ways rather than ways that tear us down and ways that lower our consciousness. And I think about some of the conversations we've had with the Black Lives Movement, right? Somebody took some of that anger and they're like, let's channel this in the right direction. Let's channel this to where we begin to open this space for dialogue and to be able to have some of these conversations that we've been having. People were getting angry and they took it and they used it in ways that were perhaps a little more constructive. We've also talked about not being afraid to speak up, to actually use our voice, or as my mom used to always say, use your words. And to do this, especially when we see injustices. Remember a woman by the name of Rosa Parks? She got angry because she was asked to move to the back of the bus. She was asked to get up for a guy that would just happen to be what they deemed the right color of skin at that moment and was asked to move to the back of the bus. And she got angry. But she took that anger and she used it for good. She used it to drive change. She also found her voice. I mean, she wasn't afraid to use it at that time, And look at the change that has rippled from that moment. That change that has, the impact that her using that anger in a constructive way and using her voice, look at the change that has driven. And we've also talked about appreciating solitude. Now, I challenge anybody in here to take a full day and just completely unplug. From your phone, your tablet, your computer, even the television, because that is technology. Suzanne's laughing. Suzanne, that means you. No, I'm just kidding. But take time to unplug from everything and just take a day. Go out in nature somewhere, swing on a hammock in your backyard, even just sit in your living room and read a good book. And at the end of the day, I challenge anybody to come up to me and say, Evan, that day was not good. Because I guarantee you're going to be able to feel a little bit of a change just from that moment of solitude. Because, it's where we recharge our batteries, right? It's where we get our inspiration. And it's where we strengthen that connection to that God that's within each and every one of us. And we also talked about knowing your worth. And yes, I'm talking about that cool person that stares back at you every time you look in the mirror. That person. Remember him or her? Remember that person? That person's pretty cool sometimes, huh? Most of the time, that person that's staring back at you from the mirror is a pretty cool person. Sometimes it's good to celebrate that person. Sometimes it's good to celebrate that person's achievements and to just celebrate that person for just being the awesome being that you are. And you know why? That person is worthy of celebration. That person is worthy of our praise. And when we acknowledge that worth, we enrich our lives, and we also enrich the lives of the people that are around us, the people that we share our lives with, and perhaps people we never even met before. It ripples out that far. So the chapter I want to start with today is called Lies or Clutter. And this is where I'm going to talk about Arun being a really brave man. And do you want to know why I've kind of kept this little cliffhanger going? He actually had the courage to lie to his grandfather. And we know who his grandfather was, right? It was Gandhi. Arun had the courage to lie to Gandhi. So to me, that's a pretty brave guy. But he tells a story where he met, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, so if I don't, please just excuse me. But he tells a story. He says that Mr. Nehru, he was the man who would later become the Prime Minister of India. He invites Arun to lunch. And while looking at the menu, Arun tells him, he's like, I'm going to have whatever you're having. And Mr. Nehru tells him, he's like, well, I'm going to have an omelet. And I don't know if that'll be okay with your grandfather for you to have that because, I know he's a pretty strict vegan. And Arun's like, oh, he won't mind. I'll have an omelet. And Mr. Nehru tells him, he's like, just to be on the safe side, I would feel better if you ask your grandfather and make sure this is okay. So Arun goes to Gandhi. He's like, hey, do you mind if I have an omelet? And Gandhi's like, well, let me ask you this question. Do your parents allow you to eat eggs? And Arun's like, oh, yeah, they allow me to eat eggs. So he goes back and he has an omelet. So he's all smiling to himself. He goes back knowing he's never eaten eggs before and consumes this omelet. And later he gets in trouble because Gandhi's visiting with Arun's parents and this subject comes up. And he's like, oh, yeah, Arun says that you allow him to eat eggs all the time. They're like, we don't allow him to eat eggs. He's never eaten an egg here before in his life. So Gandhi calls Arun into his room and he goes, he's like, why did you tell me you've eaten eggs before when you've never eaten eggs? And Arun tries to be sly with this one. He tells him, he's like, well, I've eaten cakes and pastries before, and I think there are eggs in that. And he said, of course, Gandhi burst into laughter and told him that he would make a good lawyer one day. But Arun, he tells us that lying sometimes feels like the better option, right? Especially if we're trying to cover ourselves. It's like, yeah, one little white lie won't hurt. I'm going to try to cover myself. But when we do, we're not just lying to others when we tell a lie. We're also lying to ourselves. And we're also missing out on what we could gain just by being more honest and truthful, even just from the beginning. And it's true, isn't it? It can be so much worse when we lie, and often when we do, it grows. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, who did I tell what to? What did I say? And eventually, we told so many to cover just one, we don't know what we've told. And I remember back when I was in the Air Force, I was a medic on the base, and sometimes we would help the civilian community. We'd do volunteer work at the hospitals or the schools or whatever. But we got a call one time to help one of the elementary schools, and we were giving the kids shots for something. I don't remember if it was a flu shot or whatever, but we were called out to go help give kids shots. And I remember the kids are starting to line up, and they see us getting out the needles and the alcohol and things like that to get ready for these shots. And some of them start crying. They're afraid. They see these needles, and I remember one of the teachers, she looks at the students, and she goes, don't worry, it won't hurt. And I'm like, oh, no. these kids are about to find out otherwise, because let's face it, shots hurt at least a little bit, and I'm like, they're about to find out that it's going to hurt at least a little bit. But, she was just trying to make them feel better. But sometimes even a lie to make someone feel better, like telling the kids the shot wasn't going to hurt, they're going to find out the truth, right? And when they do, sometimes it can cause even more damage, because that trust has started to erode a little bit. Do you think they're going to trust Mrs. Smith when the next year rolls around and she tells them that the shot's not going to hurt? No. They're going to be like, well, last year you said it didn't and it hurt. Now, Gandhi himself, he didn't claim to walk on water, but he also admitted that he was not above telling lies of his own. And Arun shares a story that Gandhi once told him about being a teenager. Now, we've all seen pictures of Gandhi, and we know he was a pretty small little guy, right? A little scrawny guy. Well, when he was a teenager, he said he wanted to bulk up. So he gets this idea. He's like, you know what, I'm going to start eating meat. He was raised vegan. He's like, I'm going to start eating meat. I know my parents wouldn't approve, so I'm going to do this behind their back. So one of his friends would serve meat during their meals, and Gandhi started going over there and eating dinner with them. Then he would go home, not tell his parents, go home. His mother would have a vegetarian meal out for him, and he would tell her, I can't eat, I've got a stomach ache. So he wouldn't eat. Well, then later on, he finds out that he's not really getting any more results, he said, from eating meat than he was just from eating the vegetables. So he's like, okay, I'm going to go back to being vegan again, but I'm also feeling a little guilty, so I'm going to have to come clean to my parents. So he's a little afraid to talk to his dad, so he's like, you know what, I'm going to write my dad a note. I'm going to confess in the note. So he did. He hands it to his dad, and he said his dad reads it. And he said, Dad just looks up at him and says, I forgive you, son. Gandhi told Arun that so often a clean confession with a promise never to repeat that deception again is a way to build trust. But of course, we can't just promise not to do it, right? We have to actually stick with it. Because if Gandhi had promised not to eat meat again but was eating meat every day, it's probably not really going to build that trust back up. But it kind of reminded me of an old childhood Sunday school story where two men decide to build a house. One guy's like, you know what? I'm going to use stone for my foundation. I'm going to make sure this house is good and strong. And the other guy's sitting there watching him. He's bringing in this stone every day. He's like, having to chip it down, having to lay it. It's a lot of taxing work. And that guy's like, you know what? That's crazy. I'm not going to spend that amount of time. I'm going to build my house on a foundation of sand. Then a storm comes through. And you can guess which house blew down, the one on the sand. It's because it was not a firm foundation. So which foundation would you rather build your trust on? Sand or stone? Because each time we tell a lie, we're adding a little bit more on that foundation of sand. Because eventually that storm's going to come, and that house is going to be blown down. Once that trust is eroded, it's really hard to build it back up. And when we lie, we both hurt ourselves and other people. Because the truth is eventually going to come out, right? The trust is going to be gone. People are going to feel hurt. We're ultimately going to get hurt. And it turns out to just really be a no-winning situation overall. So the next thing I want to talk about, the next chapter, is titled Waste is Violence. Now, Arun starts out a story talking about this one where he's going into town one day with Gandhi. They decide to go to the village. And Arun has this tiny little pencil nub that he's been using to do his school lessons with. Well, they go into the village and he looks in one of the windows or whatever, and he sees these nice new pencils. So he asks Gandhi, he's like, Grandfather, can I have one of those nice new pencils? And Gandhi's like, what's wrong with the one you have? And Arun pulls it out of his pocket and shows him. He's like, it's a little pencil nub. And Gandhi's like, you know what? You still got a good 2 weeks with that thing. Yeah, you don't need a new pencil right now. So Arun decides he's going to be sly on the way home. He's walking along. He takes that little pencil nib out of his pocket and goes and just chunks it into a bush. So he tells his grandfather that night, he's like, I can't do my lessons. And Gandhi's like, why? He's like, well, I don't have a pencil. And Gandhi's like, well, what happened to the pencil nub? And Arun's like, he confessed, I threw it in the bush on the way home. Gandhi, it's getting nighttime at this point. Gandhi hands him a flashlight and says, go find it. So he had to dig around in the bushes until he found that pencil. But you might be wondering how the issue of a pencil could create violence, especially violence against nature or something like that. But it requires taking a different look at violence. Now, Room mentions that when he thought of violence, and this is where I agree with him too, when I think of violence, I think about people hitting people or, with words, even cutting each other down with our words. That's the way I think of violence, bringing harm to someone or something else. But it's not just that. And Arun mentions in the book, he says, I want you to know that a lot of effort, money, and time are invested in making all the things we use, even little things like this pencil. When we throw something away, we are wasting the resources of the country, and we are abusing the efforts of people who made things for our comfort and use. So, somebody took time to make that pencil that Arun threw in the bush. There was a tree that was used to create that pencil that Arun threw in the bush. And Gandhi wanted Arun to even gain a better understanding of this, so he gives him an assignment. He's like, Arun, I want you to draw a tree on a sheet of paper, and I want you to give it 2 branches. One branch I want you to title physical violence. The other branch I want you to title passive violence. And he wanted Arun to be able to analyze his actions and how those actions affected the people around him. So he told Arun, he said, if you hit another child, if you throw a rock or anything at another child, I want you to add another branch to the physical violence. During times where you witness oppression or injustice or discrimination, waste or greed, I want you to add a branch to the passive violence. So when Arun was ready to show Gandhi, he realized that the passive violence branch contained so many more new branches. And Gandhi tells him, he's like, it's because passive violence is the fuel that ignites physical violence in the world. If we want to put out the fire of physical violence, we have to cut the fuel supply. He went on to tell Arun, our greed and wasteful habits perpetuate poverty, which is violence against humanity. So this made me think about all the times that I've ever wasted stuff over the course of my life. When I was younger, recycle, that was like some kind of foreign language. We threw everything in the trash. If I didn't like a certain type of food, into the trash it went. I never thought about the fact that somewhere, a farmer worked really hard to raise that food. An animal maybe, I used to eat meat then myself. An animal sacrificed its life for me to be able to eat that meat. Somewhere there was somebody hungry that would have given anything for that bite of food. And Arun tells us that we send more than $160 billion worth of food to landfills each and every year. And that's just in 1 year. All the while during summers when kids are out of school, or especially now in COVID when they've been going to school at home, some kids are wondering where they're going to get their next meal. And as our book states, passive violence of waste can be just as destructive as physical violence. We may not be going out and physically attacking someone, but we are hurting them still the same through our acts of passive violence. And this verse came to mind when I was writing this talk from Matthew 25:40 in the Bible. Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. So I think there are a lot of good reasons to remember why we choose to do some of the things we do. Just that human side of us. We may think one white lie won't hurt anything. Or maybe throwing away even a small nub of pencil won't make that much different in the world, and maybe it will and maybe it won't. But do we really want to take the chance of that? Do we really want to take the chance over something so seemingly small? Remember that a hurricane, it starts with just a little ripple in the ocean. So the things we do start with that little ripple. And we can send that in directions that do really good, that, help feed to this, the divine collective, the mass consciousness, or we can do things like even throwing a small nub of pencil away and take it in a direction that we don't want it to go. But don't we want for ours to be the ones that have the positive impacts? Namaste. Right. And I would like to invite you, I mentioned our youth earlier, how our youth are currently in, their youth ed class. So please join me. Let's bless them. Let our youth know that we are thinking about them today. So youth and youth ed department, we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the Christ you are. Amen. All right, and now is the time in our service where we prepare our tithes and offerings, and we are still not passing around the baskets, so you'll see them over there on the table on the way out as you exit today to get a cupcake or a cookie. Don't forget. And I also want to remind you, I do this every Sunday, but remember, Silent Unity is standing by 24/7. Please don't forget about that resource. Also, we don't have a prayer chaplain here with us live today, but there is one at home that is ready to pray with you today if you would like a prayer. There's some slips on the table on the way out. Please fill one of those out. Make sure you put your phone number on there so she'll be able to call you and place it in the prayer box. It's either Diane Gould or Josie, I think. I'm not sure which one, but one of them will call you back today. And don't forget to just continue to check our calendar online. We've got a lot of events still taking place. Some are hybrid events, kind of in person and online. Some of them are still online, but don't forget that those are taking place. So there is ways you can still stay connected to the community. And I would now like to invite you to say our offertory blessing together with me. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. And Pete will now play I Am So Blessed.